The Severe setup is back after a 1-week hiatus. After a UFC free weekend, we're back in business for the UFC card in Denver, Colorado. We're hitting the high altitude, folks. Rose Namajunas, Tracy Cortez, your main event. Santiago Ponzinibbio, Muslim Salikov, your co-main event. Crazy co-main event. But all in all, Harry, not a bad card overall to whet the appetite after a week break.
I am pretty impressed, to be honest. I mean, look, Ponzinibbio and Salikov, we'll get there. Right? We'll get there. But
it's been a year of weird co-main events. Let's be real, hasn't it? It's been really weird in some of the fight placements. This is up there. And I think what makes a co-main event more weird is some of the fights that follow it as well.
Yeah, I mean, if we just browse through this card real quick. Drew Dober, John Silver. Firstly, John Silver jumping on another card in such short notice is pretty savage. Fair play to him. But Gabriel Bonfim, Angie Lusa, very, very, very solid fight. Christian Rodriguez versus Julian Erosa. It's an interesting fight. We'll get there. Cody Brundage versus Abdul Razak Al Hassan. I didn't even know he was still fighting. Joshua Van Charles Johnson is a savage fight. Absolutely brilliant fight. Jasmine Jazdavicius versus newcomer Fatima Klein. That's a fantastic fight. They're super, super interested in that one. Luana Santos, Maria Agapova. I mean, sure, look, sometimes these things have to happen in MMA. Montel Jackson, Damon Blackshear is a great fight. Like, again,
in person, really. Those two people are the same person. Don't care what anyone says.
I do agree. When I looked, I was like, oh, stop. Which one of these is fucking which? And then I remember that Montel Jackson doesn't fade in about a minute and a half. And
there you go. That'll be the difference maker.
That will be the fucking difference. There's my analysis. Fair play to you. And then Josh Fremd, Andrei Petrovsky. That will be fun for as long as it lasts. But you're right. That, I mean, firstly, may I just say, I think one of the reasons why I like this card as much as I do is it's an 11-fight card. Right now, you and I have talked. I think between 10 and 12 is the absolute sweet spot for a card. Magic number. And I'm never going to complain if you're smack bang in the middle of that with an 11-fight card. I think there are lots of fights here that have jeopardy, right? And we'll cycle through all of them. You know, it may not be upper echelon divisional jeopardy that we may see on a pay-per-view or whatever. But for the reasons that these fights are put together, I think all of them fit really, really nicely. Now, card placement, I agree with you. I'd have probably put something different at the co-main event, and maybe we'll shoot our thoughts when we get there. But I think it's a good card. Like, I think it's a good card. I think this, like, if we were to live in fairyland just for a little minute, just for a hot second, if we were to live in fairyland, if you put a UFC pay-per-view on, you know, UFC 303, it was what it was, right? Everyone had a good time, but I didn't think it was super amazing, but you have a UFC pay-per-view, right? In a perfect world, we always have a week's break, and then we're delivered a card just like this, where, you know, you're setting your stall to say, okay, this is what the pay-per-views look like, right? Big old pay-per-views, great, good stuff. And then we can then start thinking about, these are our fight night cards where we have a ton of divisional relevancy slightly lower down the divisions. We have a blockbuster main event. Rose Namajunas, Tracy Cortez is a fantastic fight. And then we're showcasing the Joshua Vans, the Christian Rodriguez's, we'll put Drew Dober on a card. Why not? Like, I think that these sorts of fights are the ones, these sorts of fight nights are the ones that deliver perfectly after a week's break from pay-per-view.
100%, very well said. And we'll start at the main event, Harry. Rose Namajunas and Tracy Cortez. Interesting time in Rose Namajunas' career. Obviously, you know, having been defeated by Manon Fiorot, she had a win against Amanda Hebas, which set up the Macy Barber fight for this card. Obviously, Macy Barber pulled out with an injury, and in steps Tracy Cortez, who herself has been on a pretty impressive run, winning all of her 11 fights since her first career defeat. It was in her pro debut, and she's been progressing and looking better and better each fight. But I think the big question in this one is that, is she at the level of skill set to get by a Rose Namajunas? And I think that's somewhat of a loaded question coming into this fight, Harry, considering we don't know kind of what mindset Rose Namajunas carries, which seems to complement her maybe take away some of her skill set as well. It's really the story around Rose Namajunas from when she fights is what her mentality is. Or does she have that dog in her? Does she still want to do this anymore? What's her meaning and what's her purpose? Because we spoke time and time again of Rose Namajunas. She doesn't like being in the limelight. She doesn't like being a champion because it thrusts you further into the limelight. But here we are in the main event slot as well, and it's a good opportunity for her to maybe prove those ringings of doubt a little bit to be untrue if she comes in here and puts on a level of performance against Tracy Cortez, which, you know, on paper is a very winnable fight for Rose Namajunas. But as we know from watching fights, none of them are fought on paper, Harry.
Definitely not. And I think that's a really, like, that was a really beautiful sort of setup for Namajunas as a character, right? Like, it is so difficult. I'm going to go on a segue to get to where I'm going. Like, with Rose, I think when she was on the come up and when she was making her way through the divisions to try to get to a title, the idea of a title was so emblazoned into her brain and yet so distant at the same time that the limelight and these sorts of things that came with her rise were moments in her career that she could easily just downplay because the title was so massive. It was so massive in an achievement, and it was so hyper focused on that position that as the media started to ramp up, as the limelight ramped up, as the spotlight ramped up, it was like, it doesn't, none of this matters. I can block this out super easy because this isn't the title. And then when she wins the title, and, you know, we remember the speech when she wins the title, I just want to be a good person, and the tears and the this and the that. She reached the precipice, and in her own way, she had a Chris Weidman moment, I think, which was she looked out upon the landscape atop the mountain and said, "Is this it?" And the answer was, "Yeah, that's it." And like that is it. You know, what's next is a bunch of young, hungry champions that are coming. Title contenders, sorry, that are coming to try and take your fucking head off. And
that's the problem as well, Harry, is, you know, we know that she does have the mental fortitude to get the job done and put herself in that killer mentality. The problem is when you're at the top of any sport, you have to do it on a consistent basis. And that seems to be the problem with Rose Namajunas, is that level of consistency with her mentality.
Yeah, I think, you know, she's sort of spoken relatively eloquently about the fact that when she's fighting, she has to go to a dark place, and that dark place is not somewhere she enjoys to be or wants to spend significant amounts of time in. The problem with that, though, is that she's an elite level fighter. She is an elite level fighter. Now, I think in this Tracy Cortez fight, if we were to play the fight out on paper and it was Rose at full focus, full mentality, and Tracy Cortez at full focus, full mentality, Tracy Cortez is going to struggle to get this fight where she wants it, which is on the ground up against the fence. Rose's footwork, her jab, her high kicks, they're far too educated, far too fast, far too mean, far too brutal of shots and footwork selections. But right, Jasmine Jasudavicius is a fighter that I have a lot of time for. She's a tough, gritty, grindy fighter. Tracy Cortez went out there and looked absolutely fantastic in her performance against Jasmine Jasudavicius. Now, the gulfing class between somebody like Rose Namajunas and somebody like Jasmine Jasudavicius is vast and wide, but there is something to be said, I think, for somebody like Tracy Cortez, who we've not had to question her mentality. We've not had to question her focus throughout, you know, all of the personal struggles that she's had to have publicly with people in the UFC and relationships and these sorts of things. Never once has her performances faltered. If anything, she's continued to get better at an exponential rate. And so there is a point here where Rose Namajunas is 32, but not 32 in age. We're talking Rose Namajunas is 32, having started fighting at fucking 17 or whatever she was, right? So this is a wily veteran. And the reason I'm most intrigued about this is I want to ask the question of Rose Namajunas, are you focused enough? And I want to ask the question of Tracy Cortez, are you good enough? You know?
100%, and it's the perfect equation, to be honest, heading into this fight. And you know, I think we're going to learn. I think we've learned a little bit about Tracy Cortez already, with, you know, her confidence and willingness to step in here on short notice for the biggest test of her career. And, you know, she spoke today about, you know, her meaning inside mixed martial arts. And obviously she started fighting because of her brother, who's sadly no longer with us. And she chose that fight path for him. But in recent times, having gone and worked with the Pitbull brothers in Brazil, and you know, she has a new sense of meaning that she's doing mixed martial arts for herself. And I think that's a good mindset to be in here. Obviously, look, at the biggest problem that she will have to face is when the cage door closes, and how she can get in on the inside in Rose Namajunas, how she can frustrate in Rose Namajunas. You simply can do that by, you know, starting strong, not playing in and being snake charmed by Rose on the feet. I think is going to be very important. Looking to close the distance and try and making this a grindy and gritty fight. If you think that someone in Stoughton, whether they want to be in there, you have to really question if they want to be in there. And that's up to you as a fighter to do that. And that's Tracy Cortez's main responsibility for me coming into the octagon on Saturday night. And if she can do that, then we can start talking about paths to victory. Well, if she doesn't, if she has a bad start and Rose builds that confidence, you know, it could be a tough night for Tracy Cortez. But going out and losing to Rose Namajunas, Harry, at short notice, isn't necessarily the worst thing that could ever happen in your career.
So I think you're right, but I'm going to make, bear with me, I'm going to make an analysis from the soccer ball that happened recently. There are, when you look at Rose Namajunas, at least now, Rose Namajunas might be the England football team, where at the top, right, at the very, very top, it's wobbly. And you just don't know whether you're going to get offensive, fantastic, beautiful, flowing, I'm going to say football, but beautiful.
Go on, you can say football. You can say football.
Beautiful, flowing movements and fighting. Are you going to get togetherness, oneness with the brain and the body? Or are we going to get the massive amounts of talent that we have at our fingertips in our body, but no cohesion with the mind? And Tracy Cortez, on the other hand, might as well be Switzerland, where there is a couple of elements of brilliance in there, a couple of elements of brilliance. But more than anything else, it is a supremely well-drilled, well-marketed, well-put-together outfit. Brain and body are very much in sync. And that sort of a problem at this point in Rose Namajunas' career, over 5 rounds, there are going to be goal-mouth opportunities, I think, for Tracy Cortez in this one, because I have not seen in a long time, as much as I admire Rose's fighting style and her tactical outlay and the way in which she plays the ball, I think that there are moments where focus slips every single fight recently. And so that means that Tracy Cortez is going to have moments. Whether she can capitalize on those moments, that's the question.
Big question heading into the main event. I'm excited for this fight. I think it's a good fight. I think it's a good test for both Rose and for Tracy, as I said, to see where they're both at in their career. And I'm excited to see how it goes down. Women's flyweight division co-main event, as I said, Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Muslim Salikov, up there with one of the strangest co-main event selections of the year so far. And there's been a few. Not much to talk about this. Both of these guys in both of their last 4 fights have one win, both coming off a loss. The only question I have under here is what logical reason this has been selected as the co-main event.
Because it probably won't go the distance.
Yeah.
Both fighters are coming to the tail end of their career. Like, this would have been an amazing fight 5 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%.
Would have been a fantastic fight when these guys were sort of anywhere near the height of their powers. Ponzinibbio can crack. Salikov can throw spinning shit. Sure, you know, these things sometimes happen in MMA. It's sort of a matchup that you dream to put together. The thing that would have been interesting is really and truly this is either headliner or the prelims of a pay-per-view card, or it's the opening fight of a pay-per-view card for when you want to, you want to get some fans in seats and bring them into the pay-per-view in a way that is constructive. I mean, to be honest, this is going to be Ponzinibbio is going to push forward. Salikov is going to try and throw spinning stuff to keep him away. Salikov at this point in his career is way less of a volume fighter than he ever has been, and he was never really a volume fighter before. Salikov struggles to push people back. Santiago Ponzinibbio loves to push people forward. It is going to be, can Salikov crack him enough on the back foot to cause enough damage that either Ponzinibbio backs up himself or that he's able to get him out of there? Don't know is the answer. But when we have fights, I'll throw it back immediately to you. If you were to choose a co-main event that's not this one from this card, what would you pick? You have two choices.
From a co-main event that's not on this card?
Yeah, no. So from the fights on this card, if you could pick one or two that you would vault to the co-main event ahead of it.
Well, I mean, you got a 15-1 fighter in Gabriel Bonfim there that you could give the slot to. If you're looking for a fight to deliver, Drew Dober and Sean Silva, we're talking about that fight next. I mean, that you're talking about fights that are not going to go the distance. I think there's a damn good chance the way both of these guys fight that that fight is not going the distance as well. I mean, you could give a bit of a highlight to Fatima Klein on her debut, a bit of a stretch having someone coming in on their debut, but it's been done before, coming in for your UFC debut in the co-main event slot. Joshua Van versus Charles Johnson. I mean, Joshua Van,
that's my
he was supposed to be fighting what's his name on that card?
Nurmagomedov.
Yeah, Nurmagomedov. That would have been maybe because fact it was short notice and they brought it back. But there's a bunch of different, like, I mean, you said, with all due respect to Santiago and Ponzinibbio and Muslim Salikov, they're both at the end of their career. They're both not really going anywhere. Yes, it might be an exciting fight, but it's an exciting fight that can happen anywhere in the card. Like, I'm very, very peculiar in how fight cards are constructed, because it's a classic fight watchers kind of pet peeve. Your co-main event and your main event should mean something. You know what I mean? Both of them should have some level of relevance for the divisions that they're in. Ponzinibbio and Salikov simply doesn't. Now, you could argue the same about Drew Dober and John Silva, to be honest, but John Silva is a fresh new addition to the UFC. He's taken a fight at short notice, and these two guys are going to deliver. Drew Dober is not a household name, but every fan that'll be tuning in knows who Drew Dober is, knows what he brings to the table as well. If you put him in the co-main event slot, no one will be arguing that he's paid his dues. Maybe he has had a co-main event slot, because maybe that kind of pisses all over my idea, because who really remembers who's in the co-main event at these fights? But as a natural purist fight fan, I love having my co-main events and main events something to have a bit of meaning and jeopardy attached to. Back to Dober and back to John Silva, unless you do have some thoughts.
All I was going to say is just like, maybe on fight night we don't remember, but what the co-main event does mean, and will always mean, is more media attention, more interviews, more fight week sort of preparations, more stuff that happens when you're a co-main event fighter, right? And so, I agree that maybe on fight night we lose some of the efficacy of what that co-main event means, and as as we go down the years, it may be, I can't remember who the co-main event is for that card or this card or whatever it is, but at the time, you are seeping yourself and your name and your style and your character into the hearts and minds of whoever it is that will listen to those interviews. Do you know what I mean? So I do think it means something, and I think that's one of the reasons why you and I care about it.
Yeah, very well said. We care about Drew Dober and Sean Silva, as like I said as well. The fight that's, going to deliver. Like, there's not too many fights that you can kind of go out on a limb, Harry, and say, this fight is going to deliver. I don't expect it to go all the way. This is definitely one of them. Two power hitters, two guys that are looking to go out and finish fights.
Yeah, I mean, styles make fights. And what Drew Dober does is he says, what style are you good at? What style is the most exciting that I could drag out of you? I'm going to perform in that way. He has been very vocal in the last little while that, you know, I think he came to the realization a couple of years ago that a title was not in his future. Title contention was not in his future. But what was in his future is he could take the Michael Chandler route, the Donald Cerrone style route, where you put your hand up and you say, yes, I will fight this person on this day and I will try to make it as exciting as possible. He was vocal in saying that he wanted to try to pick fights. When fights were offered to him, he would pick the name with which he thought was going to be the most exciting fight for the fans, which, you know, is obviously highly commendable. But John Silver in his most recent performance, which was only a month ago, right? Only a couple of weeks ago, looked great, looked absolutely fantastic. Big hands, big hitter, looks well sized for the division. It's hard to know too much about him just yet at this level. Drew Dober is a significant step up from his debut, and we're certainly going to see what that means for him. Is it too early? Is it too soon?
I think what he's going to have to deal with here, what he didn't have to deal with in the Charles Jourdain fight, and I mean, that was only like 2 weeks ago at this stage, I'd imagine. Yeah. So yeah, it was like the break off and then he's back at it again. But where I was going with that is that something he didn't have to deal with against Charles Jourdain that he will have to deal with here with Drew Dober, and something I'm very interested in seeing in his game is how he deals with somebody that can kind of hit him with a lot of impact too. Because when, you know, it was clear when he exchanged with Charles Jourdain, he felt that power in the pocket and it didn't do anything to him at all. That makes you open up a hell of a lot more. He's not going to have the same luxury against Drew Dober, Harry.
Fuck no. Drew Dober is Mr. Lunchbox hands. Mr. Lunchbox hands. Sorry, Jesus, we'll get there, promise. But yeah, I know, I agree 100%. And I think there's also a thing where there's a level of athlete, right, that you only find in certain pockets and certain elements of your career. And that's not to say that they don't exist on the regional scene. Of course, when Drew Dober was on the regional scene, he was just as good of an athlete as he is now. But with time and nutrition and, you know, the mixture of experience alongside everything else, Drew Dober is a really, really, really good grade of athlete. And that is something that when you come up against in MMA, you know, sometimes the athleticism makes up for a small bit of a lacking of skill. And if you're John Silver and you go in there, you have to be supremely skilled to navigate the game plan that Drew Dober is going to bring, which is intensity, it's heat, it's massive, massive shots. And maybe John Silver says, sure, look, I'm trying to make as much money as I can. I'm going to go out bonuses. I'm going to get in Dana's good favor. I'm going to take the Andre, what's his name? I can't really, I've forgotten his name. Fought at 170.
Marc-André Barrios.
No, he fought at 170. Portuguese guy.
Paulo Fijallo.
Yes. I'm going to take.
Is it Andre? Or is it Andre Fijallo?
Yeah, Andre Fijallo. I'm going to take that route where I just fight as much as possible. Dana loves me. He puts me in all these spots, etc., etc. Possibly he takes that route, but that is
fucking. He's out with the fucking UFC now. That's how far that got him.
Right, 5 or 6 fights in the UFC in just over 12 months. Didn't go well, and here we are. Like, I think there is a really, I'm really interested. I'm completely veering away from the analysis here, but I'm interested as to why Gene Silver's taken this fight, right? Yeah. I'm interested to know, because, okay, he didn't take too much damage, but a fight camp has a wear and tear on the body. A weight cut has a wear and tear on the body. Yeah, it's a mad decision, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I'm very interested too. And look, at the analysis will come next week on the balance breakdown, and it'll be fun to kind of analyze this one. You know, is there anything to be said of maybe John Silva taking a page out of Renato Moicano's book and taking Drew Dober down, putting him on his back? Obviously not fan friendly, not Dana White friendly, not entertainment friendly, but at the end of the day, a win is a win is a win, and you get double your pay if you can achieve that. So it'll be interesting to see. I doubt, look, I said it to put it out there, I doubt it happens. I doubt that happens. Gabriel Bonfim, Angelusa will go at it in the 170-pound division. On the main card, Gabriel Bonfim coming off a loss of Nicholas Dalby, the first loss of his career. Are you expecting a hungry Gabriel Bonfim coming in here against Ange Loosa? You know, I always say time and time again, a guy who loses his win streak or loses his undefeated record comes back normally, comes back hungrier, more sharp, more ready. And I think that's the kind of version of Gabriel Bonfim we're going to see here against Ange Loosa, a guy who is going to stand in front of him, Harry, and will kind of play the game. And, you know, that'll make it, it'll either be a very smart move or it'll be a really silly move. Obviously, he was disappointed with his last performance, having the fight have been a no contest against Brian Battle for an accidental eye poke. Last time we did see Ange Loosa in there was a victory over Rhys McKee. You know, he's got a difficult test in front of him and Gabriel Bonfim, doesn't he, Harry?
Yeah, I think both of the Bonfim brothers have actually been just a touch underwhelming after their sort of initial breakout into the UFC. Yeah. I think that, you know, it's very hard to know what Bonfim is going to look like after a loss. It's very, very hard to know. It's going to tell us a lot about who he is as a fighter and sort of where he is in his career. He's only 26, right? So this is kind of a perfect, if we were to look at this completely objectively, it's a perfect time to take a loss. You've made a big splash in the UFC, big splash, couple of big knockouts. Then you come in and you fight Nicolas Dalby, who is a very tough out, very, very tough out. There's no shame in losing to Nicolas Dalby, especially at this point in your career. And if you go back and you analyze the loss and you go and you get better from it, then in 2 or 3 fights, nobody will remember that you lost to Nicolas Dalby. Nobody will remember the manner with which you lost. And I think they know what they're doing here with Ange Loosa. Ange Loosa is quite stiff, right? He's a good athlete. He's quite stiff, stands with his head on the center line. He's got a solid enough jab, but there's nothing, and I say this with all due respect, there's nothing special about his striking. He can do a bit of grappling, so, you know, fair play to him. But there were moments in that Rhys McKee fight where you and I, you know, and everyone here at SevereMMA, we know what Rhys is capable of, and it certainly wasn't the performance that he put out against Ange Loosa. And I think Bonfim is somebody that is able to perform higher than closer to maybe his level in the gym than he is than Rhys McKee is,
big time. So, yeah, 100%.
You know, we're looking at Bonfim has a lovely left hand. He's got a good body kick, lovely low kicks, and every shot has bad intentions on it. We know that he can grapple too. So it feels like the UFC has given him a little bit of a here's the guy that you should be beating 9 out of 10 times. And obviously for Ange Loosa, this is a tougher fight for him, but not a fight that he is completely outmatched in.
Yeah, indeed. And I think the big kind of thing is what Gabriel Bonfim's mentality is going to be at here. You mentioned that at the very start. How will he respond? Because it was a stark contrast in what he used to be doing to fighters to what happened to him. He basically got Gabriel Bonfim in the last fight against Nicolas Dalby. So I do agree with you that this is on paper a better stylistic matchup. I think he's a more dynamic striker and a more powerful striker than Ange Loosa, and I would expect him to get the win. 145-pound division next on the main card, Harry. Christian Rodriguez and Julian Erosa. Another great fight on paper here, and one that you would expect to deliver. Yeah,
I'm slightly perplexed by the booking here. Like, I get it that this is Christian Rodriguez is sort of, this is your sort of veteran test. Go out and let's see what this is. Obviously, Julian Erosa, he has some very, very niche problems, very long for the division, has a bit of grappling, got a solid DARS on him. You know, there's some decent elements to the Julian Erosa game. But if we look at the wins that Christian Rodriguez has so far at the ripe age of 26, Raul Rosas Jr. is obviously a very solid win. The win over Cameron Simon is a good win. Isaac Dolgarian, you know, we've talked a little bit about Isaac Dolgarian before, and, you know, that was a close fight, but a good fight. And, you know, we're coming in here on a 4-fight winning streak, which is a pretty solid winning streak in the 145-pound division, especially when you've been put through, not the ringer, but you've been put through sort of that prospect wheel and you've come out on top in both of those fights. And so Erosa is the early Neil Magny of the 145-pound division. In if you go and you stomp out a Julian Erosa super quick, super nicely, then we know sort of that your limit is much higher than Julian Rosa's kind of level. But for Julian Rosa as well, like, that man needs to capitalize quite heavily on the re-entrance into the UFC. And I think with this matchup, he has an opportunity where Christian Rodriguez is still a relatively unknown commodity, and Julian Rosa is not an unknown commodity, and he can use that to his advantage.
Indeed. Look at Juicy J, Julian Rosa. He did take a big chance in his last fight against Ricardo Ramos, coming off 2 losses, taking the fight at short notice, but coming out there with the first round submission win for Christian Rodriguez, as you said, on a good run himself. So 2 fighters in the form, coming into the 145-pound division. What opens up the main card, 6-fight main card, to Cody Brundage versus Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Nothing too much to write about this. Brundage obviously coming off his defeat of Bo Nickel. Abdul Razak Al Hassan, I'm sure not by, I haven't even looked at it yet, but I'm going to look at it. I think he lost by decision the last time out. And he lost by arm triangle choke to Joe Pyfer, probably after a good first round, gassing out towards the end of first round, and then being completely out on his feet in round 2, Harry. It's the trend that is yet to be broken for Abdul Razak Al Hassan.
Yeah, he looked horrible in that Joe Pyfer fight, to be honest, from start to finish. I think this is Cody Brundage has had a tough old schedule in the UFC so far. Some short notice fights, some heavy step ups, etc., etc. I think this is all right, here you are, right? This is a big fella, good athlete, but horrible defensively grappling, gasses himself out in about 14 seconds. You should be able to take him down. You should be able to beat him up, and he will quit for you. So, that's, if you offer that to Cody Brundage going in, doesn't really matter whose name is on the contract. He's probably going to sign that,
Big time. Fight at top of the prelims is Joshua Van versus Charles Johnson. We've mentioned this fight already at the flyweight division. Love this fight. Love Joshua Van. Love Charles Johnson. Always a difficult test here. And we're going to get a couple of answers here from Joshua Van and how he can handle a puzzle like Charles Johnson, who's decent everywhere, without being great everywhere, and has caused a lot of guys a lot of issues inside the octagon. And Joshua Van is next. He's the guy who has been on the rise in the flyweight division. It's him and Tatsuro Taira. They were, I think, matched at one stage. It didn't really materialize, but he's been coming out, picking up some good wins since his introduction into the UFC, looking to keep his win streak alive inside the UFC. 2 fights on the bounce he's won heading into this one. Harry, how do you see it? I love this one.
Striker versus grappler. That's what we're looking at. Charles Johnson obviously is well-rounded and can do everything everywhere, but I think it would be silly for him to try to solely strike. One of the Charles Johnson strengths is that he can mix it up everywhere. There were some really lovely scrambles that, okay, he eventually lost, but there were some lovely scrambles against Muhammad Mokaev. There was some lovely striking sequences against Muhammad Mokaev. Charles Johnson is long for this division, tall for this division, and knows how to fight in both of those elements of his body. And so that's always exciting to me. I think, you and I have talked highly about Charles Johnson for a long, long time, and I will continue to do so here. He is somebody that is far, far better than his UFC record will allow you to think. I think if you go back in 5 years or so and we peg the fights that he has had against where those fighters ended up in the UFC, we will look very, very kindly and very fondly on Charles Johnson's UFC career as and when it's finished. And for Joshua Van, this is another one where it seems as though every prospect has to go through the Charles Johnson windmill. And if you make it through, then we kind of know what the level is. And for Joshua Van here, I think, can he stop the takedown? If he can stop the takedown, how long can he stop it for? Is he able to then get inside the long reach, the long guard, the long jab of Charles Johnson? If he can, I think he hits far harder than Charles Johnson. And it could be a very difficult night for Charles Johnson should he not be able to dissuade Joshua Van's superior athleticism and his gas tank. And I don't know, but I love it. It's a fantastic fight.
That's what makes it a fantastic fight. It's really, really hard to call who's going to get the upper hand here. Obviously, look at Joshua Van has been preparing for a slot like this. Charles Johnson coming in on short notice. It'd be very, very interesting to see how both of those guys match up. The women's 125-pound division, I'm delighted to say that Fatima Klein is straight in this is the way it should have been anyway. Look at a little bit of a tougher test than maybe one would get under UFC debut, but at short notice, she was getting prepared for the Dana White's Contender Series. She gets the call to step in against Jasmine Jasudavicius. Fatima Klein is in the UFC, and I, for one, am delighted to see her progress within there. I saw Fatima fight as either a 0-0 or 1-0 on an Invicta card. I think Shauna or Danny was on that card. And at a very early stage, I seen how much she was dominating these women, how aggressive she was with her grappling. You know, it's very hard to say early days, and it's definitely very hard to say with confidence that, you know, we were going to see her in the UFC. And I would go even one farther. I'd say we'll see her in the UFC, and we'll see her make a massive charge up to 125 and 115 pound divisions eventually in the UFC, given the time. Uber prospect coming in here, Harry. Are you excited to see her in action?
Definitely. I mean, you add a grappler like Fatima Klein into the mix, and you know I'm watching. And I think for Jasmine Jasudavicius, this is an excellent test for both of them, frankly. Fatima Klein, obviously super early in her MMA career, not early in her in her combat sports career, but certainly new in her MMA career. And Jasmine Jasudavicius is somebody that has buckets of experience, and so that is going to be interesting to see how that sort of plays out in the fight. What do the UFC jitters look like? What do they look like knowing that they've come in on a short notice? What do we look like at elevation? Jasmine Jasudavicius has known that she's been at elevation, has likely been training for that for a while. I don't think it's discussed enough that elevation really does play with the cardio of fighters, hence why Abdul Razak Al Hassan is on this card for Cody Brundage. Fair play, Denver. But what we could be looking at here is an explosion into the women's divisions from Fatima Klein. If she goes out there and manhandles Jasmine Jasudavicius, as we know Jasmine Jasudavicius' level, if she goes out, puts a clinic on her, even submits her, finishes her, we have a serious addition to the UFC's women's bantamweight and flyweight. I don't know how it's going to go. I really don't know how it's going to go, but I would love to see some grappling exchanges, if nothing more. Jasmine Jasudavicius,
I'd say there's a very good chance of that in this fight, isn't there? The two of their styles are like scramblers. They like to get close the distance and take the fight down. And if that happens in this fight, we're going to see some savage scrambles here, I think.
I hope so. I really hope so.
Liana Santos versus Maria Agapova, Montel Jackson, Lamont Blackshear, and Josh Fremd versus Andre Petrosky all get the arm of death. No quick thoughts on any of those fights, Harry?
Sure. Look, Montel Jackson, Lamont Blackshear, I think is actually a great fight.
Good fight. I like it.
I was merely waving Liana Santos and Maria Agapova away. I think that both Damon Blackshear, like Blackshear is one of those fighters that if he turns up on the night, he's great. He hits hard. He's long. He's rangy. He's always in fantastic shape. Comes in sort of good confidence and could stick to a strategy. The problem has been gas tanking in the past performances. We know
he's
that
kind of like Charles Johnson in a way where he won't get the credit he deserves for the level of skill set that he possesses. Like
1,000,000%. And I actually think the same of Montel Jackson. Like Montel Jackson has kind of been waiting for a breakout performance that allows him to be noticed a little more in this division. And I think he has a fantastic jab, lovely teep, good anti-grappling. And he hits pretty hard for this division, Montel Jackson, which is obviously not something that we see all the time. And yeah, I think this is an absolute screamer of a fight. It probably won't win fight of the night. The likelihood is that we see Dober and John Silver win fight of the night, if our suspicions are to be believed. But make no mistake, this is going to be a super technical, super interesting fight.
Indeed, yeah. Looking forward to that one as well. Middleweight to kick us off, Josh Fremd versus Andre Petrosky. We won't stop on that. That kind of wraps us up for the Denver card. Look at a good one. I think we broke it down quite well. Very intriguing main event. Other intriguing fights on there. If you're getting there and you want to tune in early, please tune in and watch Fatima Klein. Look, we could eat our own words, but she's a fantastic prospect. She hasn't had the best probably preparation or the ideal circumstances heading into this fight, but we're going to fucking find out if she's a special fighter, and I'm very, very excited to see her in the UFC. And I'm excited to break down this card again next Tuesday on the Balance Breakdown with my guy Harry Powell. It will be fantastic to get that done. And we shall see you all next week at BJJ_Harry Powell, at O'Neill MMA. We will catch you then.